for is Paddy 10-year-old. And this is the one, it is quite clearly the 10-year-old that you've got to go looking for now.
Yeah, the Distillatio di Cereale, yeah,
this
Italian.
is the bugger that went out to, out to the Italian market, yeah? And plenty of it went out to the Italians. They loved it.
Yeah, and it's a great Cork Distillers, and it's funny, when you buy these old Middletons, Middleton 30, etc., Dungorney, they are older versions of this. This is Cork Distillers pot still. And there's no wheat in that. That's about 5% oats, seemingly. And then, largely for filtration. Although, again, still impacting the flavour. But it's interesting to compare when you know that background, looking back at that, Dublin and Friends, and it wasn't just Dublin, again, Locks, Kilbeg, or, sorry, not Locks and Kilbeg, the same place, Locks and Tullamore Dew. Bandon had a tumbling order mash bill, lower malt content, higher wheat. But, there's similarities that transcend, but there's also that mash of malt, raw barley, and a little bit of oats. And that's there through, I always wondered, did one collapse into the other? But no. Waterside Distillery up in Derry had that mash. Cork Distillers had it. It was there, the kind of mostly malt and raw barley with a little bit of oats. And seemingly Cork Distillers were doing it in the 1890s as well as in the 1960s. So it's a constant with them.
Yeah.
Cumber, same principle, but higher oat content, closer to 15. But anyway, again, we're looking back at the stuff, so we know, okay, well, there's no wheat in that, but there was only 5% wheat in the Jameson. And then smelling it, and again, there is that weird clovery thing, that wax that reminds you of the Tullamore a bit, but that's not related to mash, because the Tullamore had a low malt version of the Dublin mash bill, and again, keeping the 1% rye a bit, seemingly a little later than everyone else. But you give it a taste. I find it a fattier, waxier. Now, this is a pot still as well. This is pure pot still paddy. It's kind of the last of the pure pot still paddies. And that Tullamore Dew is a blend, where whatever the components are coming from. There is grain whiskey in there, whereas there's no grain whiskey in here. And you do that weird lost, like waxy side of pot still, when it's left alone, tastes extremely waxy, and I almost, I think there was a comment, was yourself, Jason, somebody said they found the Tullamore disappeared a bit on the palate, and it's almost like if you removed, and I hate to be disparaging of grain whiskey, if you kept it pure pot still and kept that weight, it's the same waxiness but with a bit more muscle in it, and it works, and pot still, we think of pot still as being oily, but pot still is about texture. Irish pot still is texturally robust, but there's so many different types of texture you get in the past, and it is that like mouth drying sensation of that wax. But you give it a smell, clover, again probably a sherry barrel, but a very weak one, none of that like sharp persimmon, just kind of well-rounded sweetness, but fortified winey. And then again,
what drew the Italians to liking this? I mean, what's going on now?
I can tell you straight away. I just love dinner. The parties.
yeah,
It's round.
oh,
You can chew on it. You just imagine after dinner have a wee sort of limoncello.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. They could have, how limoncello comes in those funny bottles, the like tourist hat shop bottles with like the boot of Italy. You just need like a cork-shaped bottle, some sort of weird flask. But yeah, there is a high raw barley content as well, lower malt, and a little bit of oats is the guts of old Cork Distillers. And it does feel like a high raw barley content. You get that ginger bristle as well, which is a classic raw barley flavor. You get that little sweetness from the oats, little creaminess, kind of waxy around the edges. Well, very waxy around the edges, but little creamy as well. But it's, and again, that clover. But it's, honestly, I prefer this to some of the really old Middleton casks, which are from the same distillate. They're like very lengthily aged, the Dungorneys of the world. When it was a 10-year-old in its prime, you look at, it happened to a lot of distilleries. Cumber, for instance, the 1980s bottling of Cumber is useless, the 30-year-old, the sweepings of the place. And in the 60s, just normal Cumber 7 is gorgeous, because you're looking at like the apologetic, this is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper, with some of these places. And then when you get them in the age where they're still a bit confident, where they've got, times were tough even then, but them on their own floorboards, as it were, they can be wonderful, and I'm a big fan of this Paddy for that reason. It doesn't, and again, there were these different house styles. Jameson does have that, or Bow Street, whether it be Redbreast or Greenspad or Jameson, has that, again, tangerine, pithy characteristics. Powers has that boot polish meets, again, musty apricot peach. And Paddy does have that weird wax and that weird cloveriness, and in the same way, B. Daly had that kind of like, and we'll get that with the Napo, the B. Daly like spice rack persimmon gig, but here it's more spirit led. It hasn't been sitting in dusty old wood for 30 years, and it's so much fun to drink. It's so, I said, a classic aperitif. It's got. We're funny. I have a bit of family from Cork, and I remember an uncle of mine talking about, he said, oh, could you imagine if you had a time machine and you could go back to Cork in the 1930s? And his son, my cousin, goes like, that's like the crap Ryanair flight of the time machine age, where if you don't want to fork out for like ancient Rome, you fly to Cork in the 1930s. And but Cork people are a nostalgic bunch at the best of times. But I could easily see myself walking to a bar in Cork in 1960, and they would give me an earful about why, Paddy is secretly much better than Jameson and Powers, because it was quality distillate. There was a lot to love there,
When I've drunk these ones, these specific bottles, love it. Like you can't get enough of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And if that was on the shelf right now, we'd all be buying it. That would be a constant.
Yeah.
A constant thing. I think a lot of people pass it by as well. They
I know,
they kind of look at it and go, it's a Paddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, no offense.
Paddy of all the blends, I think declined the most. There's nothing wrong saying that Paddy's in the 70s became very, very, very weak. Powers was picked, Jameson was picked for international grandiosity. Powers was held as the domestic favourite. Tullamore Dew was also ignored, but then it was sold to C&C, who kind of took it in their own direction. Whereas Paddy got a bit lost, despite the fact that Paddy was made at Middleton. You go down to Middleton, you learn about John Jameson, a man who never set foot in the place, and Paddy was again a Cork Distillers Company's own brand, and
It's own, was it Sazerac branding now?
It's now Sazerac, yeah. And I have no idea what they intend to do with the place, or with the brand. But funny enough,
I've heard stories that they're going to try and bring back some variants. They're going to try and bring something to the table, so it's not just a Paddy brand.
Yeah.
So maybe it will extend past that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like there was diversity in Cork Distillers Company. It's Cork Distillers Company was also North Mall, as well as Middleton. There was Watercourse at one point as well. It was already its own little Cork amalgamation before the amalgamation of IDL. But a fantastic, and of course there's the history of Middleton as a site, and IDL did keep that. Paddy's may have gone down, but Middleton became a thing. The Middleton brand with the Middleton Rares, and so almost the concept of the Cork side of the triumvirate went in both directions.
It was huge down there, right?
But it's funny. Had
Had
Paddy's always been called Middleton pot still, you'd be paying a lot more, I guess, at auction for something like this. Old Silent Distillery Middleton pot still, as opposed to Old Silent Distillery Paddy's pot still. But it's it's the same
that's
stock.
It's the same stock. It's the same stock, and I think that the misconception that people have is that the Paddy that we have on our shelf just now, put out by High Spirits, Sazerac branding, is a staple blend, and it's in bars and it's all over the world.
Yeah.
It's a very well recognised label. It's everywhere. But this stuff here, this is good stock. This is good product. This is not. Do not overlook this. If you see this, do not overlook it. Go and find it. Get drinking it. The other ones, I think, at the moment, that Jameson 3-Star, probably way too pricey for a lot of people, 1,000 odd, give or take. Tullamore Dew, 12-year-old. That's, you can get that. Get it at the right time. But, the Powers Gold, again, probably accessible. But this Paddy 10-year, before it starts to become an expensive product,
Before anyone cops
before
it,
anyone
it's
cops onto it, what it is and where it's come from, and if you're listening to this back and you know what you're doing,
10-year-old Dungorney Milton, yeah.
go and find it, because it is something wildly fantastic. Jason, do you like?
Yeah, no, it's very, very nice.
It's good.
I get like a kind of minty, sort of toothpastey type of note.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
Is, which I get from like a Highland whiskey.
Like a
more.
spearminty kind of note, is
Yeah,
it? Yeah,
yeah,
spearminty note.
absolutely.
100%. That's on there. John? John's loving it. John thinks he's in Italy right now. John's moved. John's.
Jeez, yeah, this has all gotten very meta. The good weather is gone. I don't know what you're
It's
talking
not,
about.
but it's not crap. The weather's not crap
People
yet.
are getting all sorts of notions.
We've got number.
Drinking